Hello boys and girls, welcome to the Ministry of Education and Partners COVID-19 Teaching by Radio program. The Ministry of Education and Partners COVID-19 Teaching by Radio program is a 30-minute radio intervention support program that is meant to provide continuous instruction to keep you academically engaged during this stay-at-home period, as well as preparing you, our 6th, 9th and 12th graders for the pending Liberia Primary School Certificate Exam, Liberia Junior High School Certificate Exam, and West Africa Senior Secondary Certificate Exam when the time comes. Also, in addition to this academic support, the program is meant to provide psychosocial support for learners, teachers and parents, and also tips on how you as parents and teachers can provide support to your students and children at home. Now, let's join our teacher for today's lesson.
Hello learners, parents and teachers. Welcome back to the Ministry of Education and Partners Coronavirus COVID-19 Teaching by Radio program. I am Linda Y. Dean, your radio teacher for this lesson, and this is a Rising You Movement presentation. Our lesson for today is for grades 8 and 9, and the subject is Social Studies with the topic Liberia before 1822. In our last lesson, we discussed the meaning and sources of history and the significance of Liberia history. For today's lesson, we will discuss Liberia before 1822. Please take your pen, pencil, and copybook and get ready for today's lesson. Now, our objectives are that by the end of this lesson, you will be able to examine the issues of whether present-day Liberia was inhabited before the arrival of our forefathers. 2, you should be able to discuss the relations that existed among our people after they had settled in their new homeland. 3, you should be able to discuss the highlights of the contract between the Green Coast and the world. And 4, you should be able to discuss some of the traditional institutions and practices before 1822 Liberia. Now let's talk about our keywords. Our keywords for today are prehistoric. Prehistoric. 2, tribe. Tribe. 3, traditional. Traditional. 4, descendants. Descendants. 5, aborigines. Aborigines. 6, colonists. Colonists. 7, settlers. Settlers. 8, immigrants. Immigrants. It's not immigrants. This one is E-M-I-G-R-A-N-T-S. Immigrants. 9, pioneers. Pioneers. 10, invasion. Invasion. Firstly, the word prehistoric often means the period before written or recorded history. Again, the word prehistoric often means the period before written or recorded history. For our discussion, prehistoric Liberians refer to those who inhabited Liberia prior to the arrival of our forefathers. Again, prehistoric Liberians refer to those who inhabited or who lived in Liberia before the arrival of our forefathers. These are the people on whom there are no written account or sufficient oral history. Students, I'm sure you may want to ask, was Liberia inhabited before the coming of the tribal people? And if so, how did these people live? What happened to them? To find answers to your questions is to examine our oral history. For instance, according to the oral history of the Grebo, two groups of people were living in parts of Maryland County when the Grebo arrived. The Grebo called them Babo and Blewi. Again, the Grebo called these two groups of people that were living in parts of Maryland County when the Grebo arrived, Babo and Blewi. Also, the oral history of the Crown also mentions that when they arrived, the land was already populated. According to this unwritten history, the Crown learned and spoke the language of these prehistoric people. If these and similar oral accounts are correct, then Liberia was already inhabited when our forefathers settled in it hundreds of years ago. Oral history is not always accurate. Oral history is not always accurate. Since it is not written, much of it is often forgotten, omitted, that is taken out, or changed as years come and go. For this reason, it would be helpful to rely also on archaeology in the study of prehistoric Liberians. This will involve very careful and scientific digging in places where prehistoric settlements are believed to have been located. That is archaeology. Careful and scientific digging in places where prehistoric settlements are believed to have been located. Through archaeology excavation is the same as digging, things such as fire hearths, cooking utensils, knives, and guns could be discovered. That is, when archaeologists dig, these are some of the things that they find or discover. Fire hearths, how the people used to cook, their cooking utensils, the knives they used, and the guns that they hunted or defended themselves with. By studying these ancient remains, we may come to know more about those who used them. I want you to listen carefully as I continue with our lesson. Now, let's begin with the coming of historic Liberians or tribes. Historic Liberians are the Liberians about whom some written records and oral accounts are available. They are first the tribal people Bassa or Basso, Bele, Dan, known as the Gio, the Dey, the Bandi, the Gola, the Grebo, also known as Glebo, the Kisi, the Pele, the Kra, the Kru, also called Krao, the Loma, the Mano or the Man people, the Mandingo, the Mende, and the Vai, also called Vei. Meanwhile, historic Liberians include the descendants of African slaves who returned to their fatherland from America beginning in 1820. Those are historic Liberians. They are also historic Liberians. In this lesson, we will refer now and then to the tribal people as natives, Africans, and Aborigines. We will also refer to the descendants of freed slaves from America as colonists, settlers, immigrants, and pioneers. As our ancestors did not know how to read and write, they never wrote down the names of the places from which they had migrated, or, of course, when and why they left. Consequently, it is difficult for us today to know where exactly they originally lived or fully understand why they had to leave. One way to solve these historical problems is to carefully examine our oral history. For instance, in the oral history of the Kwele and Ma tribes, the Republic of Guinea is where their forebears once lived, that is, their forefathers. The unwritten history of the Vai and Loma tribes points to Mali Empire as original homeland of their forefathers. In both cases, migration was caused by invasion and rumors of invasion. And so, to know more about the history of Liberia before 1822, it is essential to examine oral Liberian history. In addition to oral history and archaeology, a knowledge of Liberia history before 1822 can be acquired from studying the history of the empires that once flourished in Western Africa, particularly Ghana, Mali, and Songhai. The Empire of Ghana was located in what is today northwestern Mauritania. It was founded around the 15th century AD and lasted until the middle of the 11th century. Ghana became very famous for its wealth in gold. The empire had two capitals, Al-Gaba and Kumba Saleh. Al-Gaba was the political capital. This was where the emperor and his court resided. At Kumba Saleh lived other Ghanaians and foreigners that came to do trade. Around AD 1000, Ghana could boast of an army of about 200,000, certainly one of the largest the world had seen up to then. The glory of Ghana came to an end in the middle of the 11th century, beginning with an attack on her northern frontiers. Cities fell one after another. Finally, in 1076, Kumba Saleh and Al-Gaba fell to the Almoravids, or Islamized Berbers. Finally, in 1076, Kumba Saleh and Al-Gaba fell to the Almoravids, or Islamized Berbers. The Almoravid invasion was followed by a long period of civil war, confusion, and mass migration. All of this disorder could have forced some of our people who may have been citizens or neighbors of Ghana to migrate to present-day Liberia. You are listening to the Ministry of Education and Partners COVID-19 Teaching by Radio program, and our subject for today is History or Social Studies with the topic Liberia before 1822 for grades 8 and 9, and I am your teacher, Linda Wydeen. And more of these lessons can be heard on the following radio stations. 1. Truth FM 96.1, 2. ELBC 99.9, 3. ECOWAS 91.5, 4. Cool FM 91.9, 5. Freedom FM 87.9, 6. Elam 98.7, 7. OKFM 99.5, 8 Heart FM 107.9, and it also includes other community radio stations across the country. Now, students, another important chapter in the history of Liberia before 1822 deals with the interaction of the Aboriginal people. Before and even after Liberia was founded in 1822, the tribes were in touch with one another. When people of the interior took their products to sell on the coast, they sometimes made friends with the people in those countries where they had to travel. Many of these friendships lasted for several years. Sometimes, too, members of one tribe married members of another tribe. This usually resulted in one big family of in-laws. Such a way of life brought our people closer together. Another way in which our ancestors established close ties was through alliances. An alliance is generally an agreement between or among states to defend each other in case of an attack by a state that is not a member of the alliance. Before 1822, only few tribal Liberians traveled out of Africa. But in Africa, and especially West Africa, long-distance traveling was done. For example, some persons from tribes that migrated from the Republic of Guinea often returned there to visit their kins, that is, their relatives. As a matter of fact, this practice still exists today. Among the tribes that traveled extensively in West Africa and even out of Africa was the Kru tribe. As early as 1793, a number of Kru people were residing in Freetown, Sierra Leone, as employees of the British government and the Sierra Leone Company. In the construction of the Suez Canal, that is in Egypt, which opened in 1869, and the Panama Canal, that is in Central America, during the 1880s, some Kru people are reported to have been among the laborers. Class, do you know that the earliest known Europeans to visit Liberia were the Normans from France, who came in the 1st century? The Normans built a trading center in Bassa and another in Sino. Pedro de Sintra was the first Portuguese sailor to arrive in Liberia on his first voyage in about 1461. In fact, it was the Portuguese who named many of the capes and rivers in West Africa, including Cape Mount, Cape Mesurado, St. Paul River, River Cess, and Cape Palmas. The Portuguese also gave the name Malagueta Coast to the territory that lies roughly between Cape Mesurado and Farmington River in Margibi County. The name indicates that in those days, the area was plentiful with the Malagueta pepper. When the British and French arrived later, they named the same region the Grain or Pepper Coast. The Dutch came in the 16th century to buy gold and other natural resources. The English arrived in the 16th century to buy rice and other grains. In 1551, Captain William Stuyvesant landed near the Cestus River with the ship Heart and Hide. The French themselves joined the grain coast trade and exploration in the 18th century. The French were offered Cape Mesurado for the purpose of growing sugar cane, but nothing came out of the invitation. Trade in raw materials and manufactured goods were followed by trade in human lives. This was the Great Slave Trade, which is sometimes referred to as the transatlantic slave trade. It is inaccurate to say that slavery was introduced into Africa by Europeans. Forms of servitude, that is slavery, existed in Africa long before Europeans came, and one form is called domestic slavery. But domestic slaves in Africa did not suffer half as much as slaves in the Americas. The slaves were taken to work on sugarcane plantations on the Caribbean island, coffee plantations in Brazil, and cotton and tobacco plantations in North America. A few well-known European slave traders on the Grain Coast were John Hawkins, Petro Blanco, and Theodore Carnot. John Hawkins was an Englishman. On his first trip in 1562, he took with him 200 slaves. Nearly every tribe on the Grain Coast was involved somehow in the Great Slave Trade. Some tribes were known more for their role as middlemen, that is, they bought slaves from local chiefs and sold them at a higher price to traders such as Theodore Carnot. Lastly, students, let us discuss a little bit about traditional social institutions and practices in Liberia before 1822. Before the introduction of Western and Arab ideas and methods of government and religious worship on the Grain Coast, our people conducted their own political and religious affairs. In every African traditional religion, Liberia not being exempted, there is but one God, the creator of all things, who has no beginning and no end. Our forefathers neither built special buildings for worship nor set aside special days during the week to assemble for prayer. Religion in old Africa was more of a personal and family affair than a public matter. However, there were occasions on which public worship was conducted by the entire community. One of the greatest events that took place on the Grain Coast in the 1830s was the invention of a system of writing by a Vai named Dwalu Bokeli. He was born in the town of Bandakolo in Grand Cape Mount County. In Liberia of the past, education was received from family, peer groups, and associations, and mainly through the process of observation and experience. Traditional educational system was designed to develop the body, the mind, and the character of a person. Well, students, before you pick up your copybook and pencil and pen to write down your homework assignment, let's review our lesson for today. We stated earlier that the word prehistoric often means the period before written or recorded history. For our discussion, prehistoric Liberians refer to those who inhabited Liberia before the arrival of our forefathers. These are the people on whom there are no written account or sufficient oral history. Also, we mentioned that historic Liberians are the Liberians about whom some written records and oral accounts are available. We also stated that an alliance is generally an agreement between or among states to defend each other in case of an attack by a state not a member of the alliance. In addition to oral history and archaeology, a knowledge of Liberia history before 1822 can be acquired from studying the history of the empires that once flourished in Western Africa particularly Ghana, Mali, and Songhai. The earliest known Europeans to visit Liberia were the Normans from France, who came in the 11th century. The Normans built a trading center in Bassa and another in Sino. Lastly, nearly every tribe on the Grain Coast was involved somehow in a great slave trade. Now, students, please pick up your copybook and pencil and pen to write down your homework assignment. Our first question says, what is prehistory and who were prehistoric Liberians? Question number 2, who are the two groups of historic Liberians? Question number 3, by whom Ghana was conquered? And what are the two capitals of Ghana? That is, the two capital cities of Ghana. Question number 4, how did trade establish or improve relations among the tribal people? And question number 5, who was Pedro de Sintra and when did he first arrive in Liberia? I'll go over the questions one more time. Question number 1 says, what is prehistory and who were prehistoric Liberians? Question number 2 says, who are the two groups of historic Liberians? Question number 3, by whom was Ghana conquered, or who conquered Ghana, and what are the two capital cities of Ghana? Question number 4, how did trade establish or improve relations among the tribal people? Question number 5, who was Pedro de Sintra and when did he first arrive in Liberia? Thank you, students, for your participation in today's lesson. Our next lesson will focus on the topic from the abolition of slavery to the end of the colonial period. Just before I leave you, please take note of Liberia's years of instability. 1980, Master Sergeant Samuel Doe carries out a military coup. President Tolbert and 13 of his aides are publicly executed. A People's Redemption Council headed by Doe suspends constitution and assumes full powers. 1984, Doe's regime allows return of political parties following pressure from the United States and other creditors. 1985, Doe wins presidential election. 1989, National Patriotic Front of Liberia, that's the NPFL, led by Charles Taylor, begins an uprising against the government. 1990, Economic Community of West African States, that is ECOWAS, sends peacekeeping force. Doe is executed by a splinter group of the NPFL. Charles Taylor, 1997, after several years of chaotic stop-go fighting, Taylor wins a presidential election. International observers declare the elections free and fair. Border fighting, 1999 January. Ghana and Nigeria accuse Liberia of supporting Revolutionary United Front rebels in Sierra Leone. Britain and the US threaten to suspend aid to Liberia. 2000 July, stability remains elusive. Government reports first attacks by rebels who identify themselves as Liberians United for Reconciliation and Democracy, LURD. 2001 May, UN Security Council reimposes arms embargo to punish Taylor for trading weapons for diamonds from rebels in Sierra Leone. 2002 January, more than 50 Liberians and Sierra Leonean refugees flee fighting. In February, Taylor declares a state of emergency. Real rebel offenses. rebel offenses. 2003 March, rebels advance to within 10 kilometers of Monrovia. 2003 June, talks in Ghana aimed at ending rebellion overshadowed by indictment accusing President Taylor of war crimes over his alleged backing of rebels in Sierra Leone. 2003 July, fighting intensifies. Rebels battle for control of Monrovia. Several hundred people are killed. West African Regional Group ECOWAS agrees to provide peacekeepers. That's it for our lesson today, class. If you have any questions or need clarification on today's lesson, please text them to the following numbers: 0880-618-261 and 0770-741-3015. I have been your teacher, Linda Whiting. Goodbye. Amen. Amen. Amen.